Hello everyone, my name is Nick and today we're here at my place of work, Urban Jungle, where I'm going to show you guys how to mount houseplants. So one of the many things I do here at my job is mount plants, and I get asked pretty often in the store as well as online how I do it. So I wanted to show you guys how I do it. So we're going to mount epiphytic plants. An epiphytic plant is a plant that grows on another surface, so typically on like a tree in nature. That includes ferns, Hoyas, jungle cacti, so there's a bunch of different plants you can use, to a piece of wood. And you're going to want to make sure that you use a piece of wood that's not going to rot. So I'm using cork bark here today. You can purchase cork bark at your local pet store, and of course you're going to need a plant, as I mentioned. You're also going to need some sphagnum moss, and then you're also going to need some preserved moss. I have a lot in my buckets here because I'm going to be mounting a lot of plants today. And then you're going to need some fishing line to fasten the plant to the piece of wood. And then I have a piece of bonsai wire here that is going to allow me to mount the plant onto the wall, but you could also use a piece of floral wire or something similar if you can't get a hold of this. And of course you're just going to need scissors to cut these two products. So the first thing we are going to do is remove the soil from the plant. Not entirely. You can see I have a pretty root-bound fern here. We're using a bird's nest fern today, a Japanese bird's nest fern. The tag says Asplenium antiquum. And we are going to just kind of open up these roots here, tease them a little bit more aggressively than I normally would, but we need to get some of this soil out, and I'm gonna clean up this mess a little bit later. You don't need to get all the soil out. If I'm doing a Hoya, I typically like to get a good chunk of the soil out, just because I really like them to grow in the sphagnum moss. But when I'm doing ferns, they really don't mind having a little bit of soil in there, and I'm sure if you're going to mount some other type of plants, I'm sure they wouldn't mind the soil. So not a must by any means. Sometimes I see people use soil when they're mounting their plants, which is probably totally fine, but it's just something I don't typically do. But so I've gotten a little bit of soil up. Like I said, I don't need to go absolutely crazy, but I'm gonna take some moss, and I actually should mention that I did pre-drill a hole, you probably can't see it, into the top of my mount so that I can insert the bonsai wire. I should have said that beforehand, but that is something you're gonna have to do in order to mount the plant on the wall. I'm sure you could also just hammer a hole into your wood, but I would just be careful to make sure you don't split the wood. So we're going to take a little bit of our sphagnum moss and we're going to set it down in the middle of our piece of wood, and we're going to kind of flatten it down into a little bit of a pancake. Probably going to do about 1/4 of an inch of sphagnum moss, and then my plant here, I'm going to make it a little bit wider because my plant's got a lot of roots on it. And I'm going to place the plant in here. And this is the top of my wood plank here. I'm going to remove some of my stuff, I'm sorry, so that you guys can get a little bit of a better view. Although you're probably going to see me mounting 2 of these because I only have 1 camera and I would like to get a closer angle for you guys to see. So spoiler alert, it's probably 2 separate ones that you are seeing me mount right now. But I'm going to have the fern going a little bit upright. So I'll turn this piece of wood so that when I have the wood thing hanging on the wall, the fern hanging on the wall, it's going to be a little bit upright rather than just hanging flat down, which you might appreciate in appearance, but I kind of like it to look a little bit more natural, as it would in nature when they're growing on the tree and they're kind of facing up towards the sunlight. So that is something that I personally like to do. And I am going to take sphagnum moss and I'm going to cover all of these roots. I should say winter's approaching here in Philadelphia, so I'm up here in the upstairs greenhouse, which is where I have to keep all of my plants because the garage downstairs is too cold for me to have houseplants down there. So I have to keep them all up here, and I'm stuck to my little table. I normally have a design desk downstairs that's a little bit more, feasible for my projects, but I can make do for a few months until it warms up. So now that my fern's roots are completely surrounded by sphagnum moss, as you can see here on the wood, I'm holding it on because it's not yet attached. I'm going to take some of my preserved sheet moss, and as I mentioned, this is optional, but I do think that it makes the plant look, the final product look a lot better. And I'm just going to wrap the entire thing with the sheet moss, and then I'm gonna rip some of it away and add it on where it needs to be. And you don't need it to be a large sheet like I kind of just layered on top here. You can really use it in pieces because we are gonna tie this whole plant together at the end, and that is going to make it look like one cohesive piece. Okay, so now my fern is on the wood with the sphagnum moss and the sheet moss covering it. So this is basically what our final product is going to look like, but we have to tie it onto the wood now because if I were to let go, this will all just fall on the floor and be an absolute mess, and it would be nothing. So we're gonna take some fishing line here, and I'm gonna keep it on the line, and I'm just gonna get it out of my way. And I'm gonna put it underneath, and I'm gonna go right to the base of my fern, or whatever plant that you are mounting. And I'm going to tie it. And then if you have a friend, this would probably be a lot easier, but I'm here alone at the store right now in the morning. I'm going to put my finger down to hold this in place as I tie it once again into a double knot to ensure that this is tight and fastened, and I'm gonna really pull it tight. And now that it's double knotted, I can give it a little cut so that you're not gonna see that. And now the fun begins. So we are going to start taking this fishing line and wrapping it as tightly as we can around our fern. You can go around as many times as you want, but I do recommend kind of flip-flopping between going around the top, then going around the bottom, and also trying to take care to really fasten the sides. I think that the sides of the plant are probably the hardest part to get most fastened, but the more you tie this, and then also the more that you do this in practice, you'll find ways to get it done. And I also like to find little nooks and crannies in the cork bark or the piece of wood that I'm using, and I think it just kind of makes it a little bit easier to tie the plant. So I'm just gonna go around and around. And since we're using fishing line, you probably won't see it. I'm sure you could use twine if you have it, like black twine or thread, but I like that the fishing line is pretty hard to see unless you're really up close to the plant and inspecting it. So I've tightly wrapped my fishing line around my fern roughly 15 to 20 times, and I'm going to cut it enough that I can wrap it around once more. And I'm gonna get it on the back. And I'm definitely gonna have to bring you guys up close to see what's going on here. But I'm just gonna find where it's convenient to kind of fish my fishing line through. Sorry, the humidifier just randomly started making weird sounds. And I'm gonna tightly tie the fishing line to the back of the plant, or the back of the wood, onto some other fishing line, just to keep it really, really, really tight. I'm gonna pull it tight to make sure it's taut in front as well. And then just to be sure, I'm gonna double knot it to make sure that my fishing line is not going to come undone while my plant is either on my wall or up on the wall here at the store for sale. And of course, I'm just gonna cut away any excess fishing line. So here we have it. We're basically done. We just still have to add in our bonsai wire to make sure that we can actually hang this on the wall so that people can bring this plant home and nail it onto their wall. So I'm going to take this bonsai wire and I'm going to make sure that it's straight enough for me to get through the hole that I drilled. Flip it around for you guys to see. So I'm going to bring it through the hole here, and I'm going to just tie it up and twist it as if you're just doing some good old wire wrapping. Twist it just a few times to make sure that it's going to be stable. And then you can cut it. You could probably use, better shears, but I find the bonsai wire really cuts pretty easily with scissors, but don't tell my boss that I am using these scissors to cut this wire. And then I'm going to just wrap it around my finger a little bit, and once again I'm going to just kind of twist it to kind of do some wire wrapping, twisting. I'll cut this free. And here we are. Here is our mounted bird's nest fern, or Japanese bird's nest fern. So this is ready to go on the wall. You can see it's mounted with the moss to the piece of wood. It's tied on the back with the fishing line, but you're not going to see that because that's going to be up against the wall. All you're going to see is this beautiful fern. And when it's up above you, you're going to see the base of it, and it's going to look like it was just growing on this piece of wood forever, and that's how it's going to grow. So when watering these plants, I'm going to have to go ahead and soak this now. Even though I did soak the sphagnum moss beforehand, it's good to really give this plant a good soak afterwards. Ferns, I'm watering every 3 or 4 days in my home and here at the store. And other plants such as Hoya and Rhipsalis, I'm watering roughly, or I'm soaking them roughly once a week to ensure that the sphagnum moss is staying moist. I am letting the sphagnum moss for the Hoyas and the Rhipsalis dry out a little bit before I water them, but I don't want to let it go completely dry because then I'm just going to have to really soak the plant. But if you grow Hoyas and Rhipsalis in your home, you know that they like to be a little bit on the dry side, so you know what I'm talking about. But ferns are definitely going to want to stay moist. You're definitely not going to want to let this plant dry out at all. So I definitely recommend paying a lot of attention to your mounted plants because it would be a shame if you let this thing dry out and it's just a dead fern on your wall. So just something to bear in mind. But it's a really fun project. I really highly recommend doing it. It's such a fun way to display plants, and if you're someone like me who's running out of surface space in your house, it's a really excellent way to get more plants and be able to grow them and not have to worry about it taking up any more surface space. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you learned something. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at phillyfoliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day!